Welcome to episode 6. I want to just show you I've done a little bit of an inspection here underneath the chassis, and obviously we've got the typical wax caps that have to be replaced. I'm going to assume that these resistors are also bad. These things tend to get very, very out of tolerance. This one here looks like it's been smoking a little bit. It's a little burnt. So we're probably going to end up replacing all of the resistors as well as the caps underneath here. And that's okay. I also found out here, I want to show you this real quick. Let me zoom in. Let me get this camera where it needs to be. Okay, so this is the mod that I showed you on the back where someone removed the antenna terminals and put in that bayonet BNC connector. And, you know, if you look at that really close, it wasn't really a very good job. There's an exposed wire here. Looks like they've got some medical tape there holding it in place. So I'm going to need to replace this and at least replace the wire and clean it up. So I'm going to do that as well as part of my routine here. And then back underneath here, let me pull this back so you could see. Okay, great. So I've replaced all the switches, all the toggle switches. Let me pull this up a little bit so you can see them. So this particular unit has 4 toggle switches, right? 2, 3, 4. And the ones that were in there are these typical old wood switches. And if you recall the first episode, they've got some after flick when you touch them. So I decided to just replace them. There were 250 volt 3 amp switches. And here I've replaced them with 254 amp switches. That's good. On direction is this side, over here, this side here. And this switch is the only one that's different. It goes that direction, but that's a send and receive switch, so it doesn't really matter. So these are all installed and wired. And I wired everything directly, you know, to the existing wires. I didn't want to go to the tube sockets and mess with that yet. This wiring is pretty fragile. So everything has been wired with heat shrink tube, and it's all good. I also noticed on the back of this thing there's just a wire hanging out here, and I have to assume that this jack, which is probably, let's see what it is. So that's a headphone jack. I should have known that. But on this headphone jack, there's just a wire just hanging out here. So I need to look at the schematic and see what's going on with that. And in general, it's just dirty underneath there. So I have been taking some of this this QD contact cleaner and just cleaning it up a little bit. I'm going to have to do a much more thorough job. There's a lot of dust under here, but we'll get it cleaned up. And once we get those old caps out of there, this thing's going to look a whole lot better. There's going to be a lot more real estate than what we have right now. These things take up a lot of room. So that's going to be the underside of the restoration. I need to look at a few things here. This particular knob right here, which is I should know this stuff by heart. That's the pitch control. And the pitch control, I don't know, this shaft is a little wobbly. I notice it comes off with these 2 screws, so I'm probably going to have to drop that and see what's going on in here. But there are components that are soldered in here, so I'm going to need to look at that. I don't know even know if I can clean it, but we'll save that for another day. And the rest of these controls probably just need a really good cleaning. But they're all working and they're not frozen, which is good. When I soldered the tuning capacitor, if you recall, the tuning capacitor had those 3 wires coming up. As you can see here, impossible to solder it from the bottom. Completely impossible. So I had to solder everything from the top, but we'll cover that in another segment here. So that's it for now. I'll be back. Hey, so I have an update on this can. I've been thinking about it all day about how does this screw, how does that really work? And I really didn't know. And on my video that I put up today, there was a few comments about, hey, it's not so hard. Take a look at it. Again from John. And I was close to getting to that point when I saw his comment. But basically, what I did is on the top of that can that had the broken screw, I put something underneath the coil. right? That was this way it would, you know, protect it and not bounce around. And I removed that screw that was on top, and basically this shaft just unscrews right out, and it holds that coil in place. So this is the broken one that was in there. So what I did was I took a number 6 screw, very similar to this one, and I lopped off the head, and I put it through a tap and die set and got the threads in good shape. And I took that and I screwed it right into that and held the coil together to the ceramic, and then put a screw on top just like it was. And what you'll see here is I now have a pretty good piece sticking out here that I was able to secure with a screw. So this thing is now solid. I didn't have to destroy anything. I didn't have to ruin anything. It was a fairly straightforward operation. So the moral of the story is, don't be scared of this stuff. Just think through it. So I just wanted to report that that's done. So now our IF cans are complete, and we should be in good shape. Okay, be back. Hey everybody, before we begin the dial string portion of this, I wanted to go over something with you. So if you recall, when I put these cans back on, I used a piece of plastic like this here. If you remember, I put that in there, life was good. Our good subscriber JP though reminded me that this type of plastic is going to have some type of capacitance, which is not really what we want. We want something completely non-conductive. And I through JP realized that this was a bad choice. So a number of you in my last post mentioned something about fish paper. Now I never heard about fish paper, no idea what it was. But essentially, this is fish paper. Now on the radios that you and I work on, this is usually brown, but this particular one is a gray color, and it's non-adhesive. They sell it adhesive and non-adhesive. This was about $12 a roll, I believe, on Amazon, and it'll last me forever. And this fish paper is what they use in the top of these cans. So the plan is going to be for us is to cut a piece of this fish paper that will take the place of this plastic here, right here. So what I've done is I've cut a piece of the fish paper here that I know is the right size. It measures 1.5 inches across. In this direction, I've got 4 inches. And I've marked off the center with the center line right there. And these are my fold marks right here. Okay? So we're going to fold this like so. Make sure we get a nice tight crease in there. And then we're going to do the same thing on this side. Make a nice fold right there. Okay? And that's going to give us our U shape. And then we're going to do a test fit inside the can and make sure that it's the right size. So if I put that down in the can, it fits in there great. So that's step 1. Step number 2, when I showed you in the last video how to flatten out the tops of these cans, I used a socket to do so like this. Okay? John from Arkansas, my good friend, who is the one that showed me this little trick, said, hey, wait a minute, Ron, I didn't say use a socket. I said use a screwdriver, a flat screwdriver. So you'll see the end of the screwdriver is flat, and he's right. So basically you just take this thing and just tap around. It's aluminum, and it's going to work just great. All right? And when you're done, you've got a nice flat top. Okay, with that out of the way, we're going to get back to our piece of fish paper. So all I'm going to really do here is use the old piece as a template. Okay? So I'm going to lay that on top of there, in between the lines, like so. Just like that. I'm going to get my marker right here. And we're going to make a little mark there, a mark here, a mark here, and a mark there. Okay? And we know that this right here has to be a square hole, like so, just like that. And this is where our screw goes, and this is the hole where the screws are. So we're going to make it a little bit oversized, just like that. Okay. So first thing we're going to do is on this square one, we're going to use a knife, and we're on a cutting mat here. And we're going to simply score like that. It doesn't matter if it's a little too big, it's okay. It doesn't have to be exact. Okay, so there's our square. Then we're going to take a hole punch, good old hole punch. And the first thing we're going to do is make the center hole, like so. Perfect. Now we're going to make the holes for our screws. And you'll notice that I'm doing multiple punches here, just to make sure it's the right size. I'm going to do the same thing on this one. Okay, now we're going to do a test fit. Now inside this can, this square hole has little ears that stick up, like this. So theoretically that should fit around the hole that we cut, the square hole. So we're going to take this and put it in there, see if we can get it to line up. Okay. Perfect. So if you can see in there, you'll see that the paper is now in there. The little ears on this square hole are actually what's holding the paper in. Okay? So, so we're in good shape. Now all we need to do now is put some glue in there and hold that in place. I'm going to stop the camera and we'll do that in a moment. Okay, from a gluing perspective, all we're really going to do is just drop a little bit of glue. I don't know if you could see this, it's going to be hard to see. But I'm going to drop a little bit of glue right underneath that little flap there. And then we're going to press it and hold it for a little while. Just going to use standard Elmer's glue here. Hopefully this can will never be taken off again. I'm going to make sure that glue runs down in there. Okay, and we're just going to push it and hold it for a second, just like that, until it gets a little tacky. Now I think this paper also comes in an adhesive form, which I think would be a real pain in the ass to get down in there. So that's why I elected to go with the one that wasn't adhesive. And if you look down there now, you could see that it's there's glue in there. I'm going to let that set for a few minutes here because I don't want to push the other side and have it pop up. So let me turn the camera off and we'll do the other side. Okay, I've just put the glue on the other side. I forgot to turn the camera on. That's okay. So the glue is now in there. I'm going to push down and hold on that piece of paper just until it gets a little bit tacky, just like I did the other one. And you could see by looking at the top here that the holes line up just fine, perfectly. And I think we're good. So we'll take a quick look inside there. Let's see if we can zoom in a little bit. I don't know if it's going to work. So you can see what our paper looks like in there. You can see the glue. It's going to set. And now we have our fish paper. Okay, so after this completely dries, the next step is going to be to put it on the back on the chassis. Right over here, you'll see I've got that coil kind of hanging out in the breeze there, and we're going to put it right over there, and we're going to secure it in the bottom. You'll notice that I have this blue tape on here. I'm just stopping the speaker from flopping around as I flip the chassis over. That's really all that's doing. So we're going to let this dry. And then our next step is going to be to begin the dial string. So I will come back with that part shortly. I'll be back. Let's pull this camera back a little bit. One thing before I work on the dial string, I took the radio itself came with some tubes. Didn't have them all. It was missing some, but the ones that were in the radio all tested bad. Every one of them. You could actually shake them and hear things floating around them. So the person that sold it to me just decided to put in some old tubes in there. That's okay. So I did have a couple of 6 SK7s. So I've got these 3 right here. And I had to buy a couple. I had to buy the 6K8 I had to buy the 6SQ7, I had to buy the 6H6, and I had to buy the 6J5GT. This is an interesting one I wanted to show you. It's a Mazda tube. Didn't even know Mazda made tubes. I don't know if this is the same company as the car company, but they make a tube. And it's a Mazda 6F6G. So we'll put these in the tube tester, make sure they're good. So word of caution, if you buy a radio, don't plug it in and assume it's going to work, because it definitely would not have worked in this case. Alright, let's start the dial string. Okay, one more odds and ends before we get to the dial string. I did do some research on this radio and found out that these used to be white. The original radio, these were white, and they've turned brown over time. And you could see here, it's a lot more brown on the top where the dial scale is than down here. And I assume that has to do with sunlight or something. No idea. But anyway, we're going to leave them the way they are. I'm not going to mess with it. I'd love to try to figure out a way to brighten them up again, but I'm not doing that. So I'm going to keep that vintage look. Alright, here we go. Okay, we're going to begin the dial string. This may take a while here, so this video is probably going to be longer than normal. So the first one that we're going to do is going to be right here. It's the main tuning dial drive. And I'm going to put that close to the camera so you can see it. It's right here. I'm going to read it. Tie one end of a 16-inch length of 30-pound test dial cord to the tension spring at the position 1 on the main tuning capacitor drive pulley. So here's the spring, right here. And looking at the diagram, here's an exploded view. Number 1 is right here. See number 1 right there? So, first thing we're going to do is we're going to take this old string off here. A little hard to get that off there, but anyway. There we go. Alright, so we're going to get 16 inches of dial string here. I've got my yardstick right here. And we're going to go with 16 inches here. Let's see what we get. We'll go right to the end. Going to stretch it. And 16 inches is right here. And we're going to do a little snip. Okay. There we go. 16 inches. And it says to tie one end to the spring. So we're going to do that. I'm going to make sure we use a double knot, just in case it slips. This is where all you military guys probably know all those fancy knots, but I don't. Alright. There's our knot. And I'm going to bring the camera down here so you can see me do this, so I'll be right back. Okay, so I have the spring attached to this wheel, and the instructions say, stretch the tension spring and follow the stringing procedure 1 through 4. At position 4, tie the cords securely to the spring. So according to this diagram, which I will show you the exploded one, they want me to come here, come around this pulley, come back here, go around, and then come back up. So, let's see what we got. So we're going to bring this down here. I believe that there's a hole this has to go through. Doesn't say that. Let me look at the instructions. Yes, it does need to go through the hole that's in the pulley. It doesn't say that in the instructions, but it does. So we're gonna thread that through there, like so. Good. Okay. Imagine doing this in a factory all day long. Alright. Tuning capacitor is fully closed. So we're going to come out one, and we're going to come right here, 2.5 turns. There's one turn. That's one turn. That's 2 turns. It says 2.5. How do you do 2.5? We're going to start this over because I don't have any. It says you got to put tension on the spring. So we're going to put tension on the spring, like so. This is interesting how you do this. You're all sitting there laughing, going, this is why we don't restring things. So there's that's one. There's 2. And we lost the tension on the spring, so we're going to pull a little bit. I don't quite understand the 2.5, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. I'm going to come back over here, over this gear, like this. And then we're going to run this up through that hole. Well, there's really no room to work on this thing. Let me get some more light. This is where having that little slit in the wheel comes in handy. I'm going to stop this for a minute here. This is going to take me a while to get this in. Okay, I'm still struggling with this thing. I have my loop around here and I have this clamp on it. It's actually holding the spring tension here, which is really good. But this thing is a bear, only because, like if you look here, there's a hole in the top and you have to run 2 strings through that hole and tie a knot. And on this one, the knot is behind this plate here. So it's going to be really hard to get this thing done, but we're going to keep plugging along.